This conference will now be recorded.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Excited to share a really spectacular solution on monitoring, managing, and improving employee productivity from our partners at Prodoscore. And I'm joined by Amanda Holstead today, who's our local channel manager here in Chicago. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you for having me, Sam. Nice to see everybody.
You got it.
Yeah.
So here's today's agenda. We're going to kick off talking about what we see as today's dilemma and the underlying problem. We're going to introduce USA Voice and Data. We're going to explain how we help clients evaluate their technology options and provide some insight as to the drivers of cloud solution adoption. Obviously, the solution from Prodoscore today is a cloud-based solution, and it really helps provide that oversight, particularly in today's age of work from home. And why we're going to share a few statistics why we think work from home is here to stay, which is really setting the grounds for Prodoscore and how valuable that solution is of theirs. So Amanda's going to be going ahead and providing some background and then providing a live demo. We'll then be wrapping up with a few key takeaways. How do you start looking at evaluating what work from home options are available to you, whether it's with Prodoscore or with any other sort of solutions that you need to make that as productive as possible. So that's really it in a nutshell from an agenda perspective. So let's get started. So what's the problem? So obviously COVID has fast-tracked a major business shakeup and cultural change that nobody had really had any sort of plan for. It's not the politicians that have been caught with their pants down. Business leaders of all sizes have been also caught asleep at the wheel. They didn't really have any idea that they were going to be forced to move into this sort of distributed workforce environment quite so abruptly. And so that digital transformation, which might have been on the sort of back burner for a lot of businesses as something that they wanted to do sometime in the future, has now been fast-tracked, and they've had to sort of go ahead and adopt those procedures already. So when you look at addressing the problem, it's pretty clear that the future of work is now. COVID has really forced digital transformation to happen on the immediate time frame versus a gradual and slow rollout. Workforce being forced to work from home has necessitated the mass adoption of cloud solutions, and unfortunately that adoption has taken place without any tools being put in place for how to effectively manage this new work from home norm and the people and those individuals who are actually doing the work. So the dilemma has really been around securing employee health while maintaining business productivity. So how do you actually go ahead and decide whether you should reopen your office or just extend your remote working indefinitely? If employers are to maintain that health of their employees, then clearly the best way to do so is extending those remote working arrangements. But how do you ensure that those people working remotely are as being productive as they were when they were in the office? Sure, you can provide them with a variety of unified communication solutions from leading providers such as your Zooms and your Ring Centrals and Vonage for improving collaboration and productivity. And indeed, we've helped hundreds of businesses do exactly that, implement those solutions. But how do you really manage, monitor and track your employees, track their activity, track their performance, such that you can provide coaching to folks who are struggling and give them guidance on effective processes and practices that are being used by their high-producing colleagues. Most of the businesses today have actually been forced to actually, I wouldn't say most, many businesses have been forced to extend remote working without any consideration of how that's impacted their employees' productivity. So I don't know if any of you are able to track what each of their employees is actually doing with their time each day. If so, I'd love to hear how, other than spending a lot of time on conference calls and so on and so forth. Equally, I'd be interested to hear if anyone has got anything to share on, like, what they recognize as the productivity of their workforce compared to when they were working in the office. Don't know if anyone wants to chime in there. Well, obviously nobody wants to jump in here, but if you don't have a way to do it, then today we're obviously going to be demonstrating a solution will allow you to do just that. And that's why we're so excited to have Prodoscore with us to demonstrate that solution. So a bit on USA Voice and Data. We're a leading independent technology solution advisor and broker. Obviously, one of the key areas we help clients with is with digital transformation and the adoption of cloud and more modern technology solutions. These actually solutions are run across the gamut. But one thing that we have is just this massive portfolio of cloud solution providers. Within them, Prodoscore is front and center here today. But as I said, we help people with that adoption. One thing we have found is we have developed, from working with so many businesses to make that adoption take place, we developed this really neat interactive quick assessment, which is almost like an RFP, which really helps us understand the driving forces besides the decision, around the decision to enable work from home. And that helps us very quickly evaluate for our clients technology and cloud solution providers that can help them best meet their needs. By helping so many, our engineers have identified a multitude of drivers for cloud solutions. And as you can see from the 9 most common, 3 tie directly back into the problem being faced by businesses every day now. Enabling remote working, managing those real estate expenses when they're not really using their offices, and then a bit about the performance of their employees. How do you actually optimize that workforce performance? So in conjunction with that, we've looked into a bunch of research that's been done, and it's pretty clear from us, work from home is here to stay. Our research, in conjunction with others that we've looked into, have shown that employers that allow remote work see a 25% reduction in employee turnover. 50% of those folks interviewed felt less stressed because they weren't having to deal with traffic. 82% of millennials saying they're more loyal to their employer if they have flexible work options. 80% of employees who were working remotely reported higher levels of morale. And equally, another 80% said their stress levels were lower, and 70% were able to lower their absenteeism because of it. So obviously, there's some folks who previously might have taken a day off because guess what? They've got the gas man coming to fit in some new meter or something like that. And instead of having to just bow out of work for the day, guess what? They're just handling it from home because they're there. I think that all kind of makes sense. And interestingly, 65 respondents think that their remote work schedule actually increases their productivity. And I think you're going to see today from Prodoscore how they can actually measure that increase in productivity. So with that, I'd like to introduce Amanda. Amanda, tell us all about Prodoscore and this performance management solution you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Sam. I appreciate it. So like I mentioned, like Sam mentioned, my name is Amanda Halstead. I'm the National Channel Manager for Prodoscore. And essentially what we are doing is we're giving you guys the opportunity, or giving leaders the opportunity to visually see what their employees are doing on a day-to-day basis. What does their activity level look like? Are they watching Netflix all day and telling you how busy they are? Or are they actually so busy that they're on the verge of burnout? Because we've also seen the opposite to be true with that, where some of these employees aren't knowing how to necessarily shut things down like they would normally working a 9 to 5 in an office. Instead, they're working from 7 in the morning until midnight. So because of that, this is a great quote from Warren Buffett. If you can't read the scoreboard, you don't know the score. If you don't know the score, you can't tell the winners from the losers. So that just gives a great introduction into Prodoscore as well, because one way that we actually provide you with visibility is through that of a score. So Sam, if you could go to the next slide for me, please.
Sure. Yeah, I think what's interesting here is, Amanda, like without this solution, effectively we're all kind of like flying blind as to what our remote workers are doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, I remember, working at Accenture, Accenture was, a big believer on, you get what you measure, right? And yeah, you get what you inspect, not what you expect. So I think, this whole concept of flying blind is pretty scary for most employees and most senior executives. Not having that same visibility and control over what their employees are doing is exactly why we got so many people sign up today to come see this. So I'm excited.
Exactly. I mean, when you're in the office with somebody, you can tell if your team is goofing off the whole time, just talking, not getting anything done, etc. You can physically see that, so you can talk to them. You can say, hey, we need to settle down. We need to get working, whatever the case is. But when people are working remote, you have no idea what they're doing, like you were saying. So what we do is we leverage machine learning, AI, natural language processing to capture and analyze all of that data, and be able to understand the overall behaviors of your employees. So in that way, you can do things like better coach them. You can better understand what's creating success versus failure, and then you can replicate those top employees as well, amongst a host of different things. The easiest way, though, to really describe how Prodoscore works and to correlate it with something that we all know, is by comparing it to that of a FICO score. So obviously, I don't need to explain to you guys what a FICO score is, but as we all know, the FICO score is derived of thousands of financial data points, that are all pulled together, and you're provided one simple credit score that's showing you an understanding of, is my credit good or is it bad? Is it average? Where is that health at, right? So similarly, what Prodoscore is doing is it's gathering thousands of daily activity data points in the business tools that you guys use on a daily basis. And then we're calculating all that data and providing one simple score. So as a leader, if you only have 10 seconds in the beginning of your day to understand, was my team being productive yesterday or not, you can simply do that. Or if you really want to take a deep dive into the data, you can do that as well, as you'll see when we go through the demo.
Right, just in the same way that you could look at your credit report, right? You get that score, but if you want to see what's driving that score, you could dig deep into the credit reports from the 3 different credit reporting agencies, right? So,
right, yes. So the question is, though, what is a score, right? What does that productivity score look like? So we base it off of a 0 to 100 scale. And after working with over 35,000 clients of ours, we have found that anyone who is scoring below a 30, those are the people who are likely to attrit. They're not being productive whatsoever. They're not hitting their goals if they're on a sales team, or if they're not being successful in whatever given role they are in. This is an enterprise level type of tool. It's not just for sales, for account management and finance departments, whatever the case is. All of your knowledge-based workers. So those people who are under a 30, those are the ones that you really need to concentrate on. You really need to see what's going on because there's some issues there. On the opposite end of that spectrum, however, you have the people who are scoring above a 70. Those are the people who are highly engaged. Those are the ones who are very successful in their role. They're probably hitting their quotas. They're the top performers in their role. And they're using the tools necessary to be successful, right? So these are typically your employees that you're wanting to replicate, the ones that you're having maybe mentor your new hires, etc. Okay, and then the people that are below or between like a 30 and a 70, those are the people that are on average. So, they're not, necessarily in the red zone, but is there room for improvement? Sure. All right. Next slide, if you will. So this is just a few areas where our customers have seen benefits from Prodoscore. So one of the biggest things, especially right now, is in employee productivity and just streamlining employee experience while they're working remotely, or if they're in a distributed workforce. So being maybe in a hybrid role where they're working in the office and from home sometimes, or working from a beach, we don't know. But anyways, what this does is it allows them, like I said, to understand non-invasive technology that provides that consistent, objective feedback. So you're able to see consistent activity levels or inconsistent from your employees. So then that way you can really understand, what is going on a daily basis. And then you can have open communication with your employees as well. The other piece to this, another part that I want to point out is cloud tool adoption. We all know that it takes tools to put in place in order to be successful as a company. Things like Salesforce or RingCentral. You need those tools in order to run properly. However, those are very expensive tools, and you need to know that your employees are actually using those tools, because otherwise you're not receiving the ROI on those tools. So what Prodoscore does is we have a gamification piece to Prodoscore where the employees are given a email at the start of every day that tells them what their Prodoscore was and how they stack rank amongst their peers. And they know that the only way to increase their Prodoscore is by adopting those cloud tools. So in turn, they start using those tools a lot more than they typically would. Okay. And then on the far right-hand side, you see some client proof points that we've seen, where one particular company saved over $1.6 million in savings in office space by going fully remote because they had that visibility with Prodoscore, where they didn't need a bunch of satellite offices throughout the US. And then also we've seen an 8 times increase in cloud business tool applications. All right. So this is just a couple of our clients that we have on board with us today. And I'm not going to go through, these reviews, but I can certainly provide any case studies if you guys do want to see any case studies after we're finished. But here's just a couple of our clients that we have today. All right. So I'm going to, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And then that way we can jump into the demo.
All right, just making you presenter now.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right. Can everyone see my screen okay? Perfect.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So what you're looking at here is the dashboard for a leader. We do work off of a hierarchy base. So what happens is anyone who has any type of employees that are reporting up to them, that's what they're going to see when they log into Prodoscore. However, if you're working as, let's say, a team lead of 5 individuals, you would only see those 5 individuals on your Prodoscore. However, if you're like a CEO of a company of 500 people, you're going to have access to view all 500 employees. Okay. And it is single sign-on as well. So you would simply sign on with your Office 365 or G Suite username and password. So one thing that we always want to make sure to have as a consistent piece to Prodoscore is simplicity and an ease of understanding with this. You don't need Google Analytics backgrounds to be able to understand what you're looking at, okay? So to get it started, we are able to pick a date range that we want to look at. So we're going to look at the last 7 days, but if you're wanting to compare quarter over quarter, you can do that year over year, etc. So looking at the last 7 days, this organization Prodoscore, this is one of 2 places that we're ever going to be able to see the organization as a whole, no matter what our leadership role is. So I know that as an organization, the company had scored a 71 as their Prodoscore. It was a 2% decrease from the previous 7 days, which isn't alarming, but you can imagine if this was like a 50% decrease, there'd be some questions raised. Underneath that, going off of what I had explained earlier, you have these 3 buckets. So you have those red zone employees that are scoring below a 30, the ones that aren't very active in their given role. You have the people who are within average, and then you also have the people who are scoring above a 70. So just to give you like a brief glance as far as the overall health of your team. Underneath that, you have the organization Prodoscore chart. So this is going to show you a nice line graph that gives you an understanding of where the organization as a whole was week over week. So this dark blue line is showing you where everyone stood for these last 7 days. But if you look very closely, you can see like a light blue dot there. And there's actually a light blue line that's kind of behind it. When there's only a 2% decrease, obviously there's not going to be much difference, but you would be able to see another blue line that shows the previous 7 days. Okay. From there, if you have any managers that are reporting up to you, you would be able to click into each one of those managers and understand what their subordinates are scoring. So I can click into Jim Mack, and I can see he has 1 individual underneath him at this point So I can see what she is scoring day over day in this bar graph. And then that way I can understand, okay, do I maybe have a manager problem that's going on, and that's why there are a significant amount of employees that are scoring below where they need to be? Or what's really going on here? If you have multiple departments that are reporting up to you, that is where you will see the different departments here on the left-hand side. So we have, for this demo account, we have sales, marketing, and administrator. We're just going to click into this sales team. So with this specific sales team, we have 5 individuals on this team. So it's going to show me who all is on the team and how they stack rank amongst their peers on a day-to-day basis. As you can tell, you can significantly tell a difference if you have anyone that's significantly below the rest of their peers. One thing to note is that we're never going to compare a sales individual against like a finance person. We understand that there are quite a bit of productivity level differences in expectations for given roles. So because of that, you won't ever see those two type of roles or different roles being compared against each other, but you will see peers in one type of role being compared. From there, you're able to see a list of each employee and what their average was for these 7 days. So in that way, I can click into any one of them if I really feel like that is necessary. But we're going to go into Matthew's specific score for demo's sake. So one thing about Matthew is that he is one of our top reps. So this would be somebody that I would say, hey, look, I want to be able to replicate his success. So as you can tell, he's pretty steady above 70, on a day-to-day basis. This light blue is showing us what he scored the previous 7 days. And then the dark blue is this 7 days that we're looking at now. We are going to go into Mondays though, to really understand what is going into this Prodoscore. So this is really cool because you're able to understand the true power of Prodoscore. Typically, all of these tools would be very disparate systems. They would all be different tools that you would have to log into individually to understand how productive is my employee being. So given the fact if you have, say, 50 employees, that's going to take a lot of your time. This gives you one window pane to be able to see all of those all at once. So one thing to note also about Prodoscore is that we're non-invasive. We are only going to track the productivity that is going on in these given tools. So for you, if you're wanting to get set up with Prodoscore, you would tell us what tools would be necessary for you to see in this. Okay. So for Matthew, we've determined that G Suite is an important tool to be tracking. So is Ring Central, Salesforce, and LinkedIn. Okay. We tie into these tools via an API. Apart from LinkedIn, we are going to tie in via a Chrome extension. So then that way it makes it very easy for us to gather this data. So we can see all of the emails that he has been sending. We can see how much time he's sent on Google Meets, phone calls, Salesforce, etc. And then below that, we can actually see a heartbeat of his day. So when did Matthew start his day? He started a little bit before 8:30 with some LinkedIn activity and an email. And then throughout his day, he was highly active. Each one of these little logos represent that activity or that tool that he was working in at that given moment. And then that way we can see when did he start versus when did he end his day. Okay, so given the fact that he took, very, very small breaks here and there, equaling out to maybe about 15 minutes, that's not an issue for me as a manager. So I can understand that he's highly active. But then what we do show, since we don't necessarily track keystrokes, we don't track or we don't take screenshots of their computer, what we do is we track gap time, which is what you're seeing in this red point here. So this gap time is showing me that Matt wasn't productive in any one of these given tools. He could have been, taking his dog for a walk. He could have been making himself lunch. Maybe he was on Netflix. I'm not exactly sure. But what I do know is that he wasn't active. Okay. So that gives you a really great understanding. Like I said, Matthew is one of our top reps. I know that he's extremely productive, as you can see. But if I have somebody who's struggling, maybe they have 4 or 5 hours throughout the day of gap time. That's not okay with me as a manager. We need to start having a conversation of, all right, if you want to be successful in your role, we have to be working throughout the day. Okay. Pretty
Amanda,
standard.
what happens when somebody is like working in like a Word document or something like that, and they're in that document for a long time? Do you recognize that they're in the document for a long time, or is it only when they save it, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we only track cloud-based tools. So we're going to track if they're like when in Microsoft Word, only if like they're in OneDrive or Teams, for example. Okay. But what we do is we will check every time that that is saved or every time that that document has been completed. Okay. But what it won't show is gap time. So let's see here. So it looks like he had one Google Drive activity yesterday. So he was working in this specific Google Drive. So it looks like he was working in that. He was also working in a few other tools as well, but he had completed this document throughout that time. Okay. Does that answer your question?
So basically, if I've got like Word open and it's on like the top screen, because I'm a terrible multitasker,
Yeah.
and I'm flicking back and forth, what does that look like in this heartbeat?
Yeah, so it's not, if you're idle in that specific tool, then it's not going to show that as an activity.
That would be
Okay.
gap time, but if I'm in there actually typing away and stuff like that, it will recognize that.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
cool.
But with like the emails and everything, you can actually click into any one of these emails and you can see exactly what he was sending out. And then we also give you the option to either show the entire email or you can hide that as well. Keep in mind that's why security is so important with this. And that's why we have all of that buttoned up, because we don't want like another manager seeing another employee's
Emails.
emails and data if they're not essentially reporting up to that manager. Does that make sense?
Yep, yep.
And so I'm able to understand exactly what's going on. And then we also, on this right-hand side, you're seeing these little smiley faces. So what that is showing me is we are actually using natural language processing and sentiment analysis to understand the overall mood of Matt's emails. So in that way, we can determine, okay, maybe this was like if he's showing like like there's an angry face, for example. I know it sounds very elementary at first, but seeing those different types of smiley faces, what it's doing is it's showing you, hey, look, Matthew is sending out all these emails, but there's an issue here. It's not necessarily like good emails, or maybe he's handling a lot of issues that he shouldn't need to be handling as a sales rep. So we need to dial in here and really investigate what's going on and why are there so many issues going on here. Okay. And then for LinkedIn, I do want to show you this since it is going to be a different type of integration. So we use Chrome extensions to track things like LinkedIn or HubSpot or any tool that you're using on a Chrome browser. And so essentially what that's doing is it's showing you anytime that URL changes, it's going to track. Okay. So I can see who he's looking up. I can see if he's just going into Sales Navigator, what he's doing in there. And then I can also see if he's looking up a specific person. Okay, and then I can also click into any one of those links to really dive in even deeper. Okay. From there, we also are beta testing what's called correlations. Now, this is a really cool aspect of Prodoscore because we're actually able to pull specific keywords, phrases, even other people that are being used or spoken to on a consistent basis. So let's say, for example, you have a specific product that you're wanting to push, or you have a specific, conversation that you're wanting people to have, where they need to be using the word productivity on a consistent basis. For us, our team has to be using productivity because, as you guys are aware, Prodoscore is helping with employee productivity. So I'm able to see how often our employees are using that specific word, who is using it, who's not, and then what products are being used when that word is being spoken about. So Jessica, she has used it the most. Looks like she sent out a mass email using thoughts on productivity. So that would make sense. And then I can actually dive into that detail as well and understand how she's using that word. Or I can go in here and get an understanding of what phone calls are being made, what emails are being sent as a team that uses the word productivity, etc. And then I can also do that with people as well. So I can understand who is being spoken to the most. So if there's somebody who is taking up a lot of my employees' time, maybe it's a sales rep, but they've already sold that person. So maybe it's a conversation where I say, hey, look, this person is taking up a lot of your time. We need to start pushing that person over to our support team and let them handle this customer from here on out. So that way you can start concentrating on sales. Okay.
So the phone tracking. So you've got some integrations. Is it just a simple API to, or do people have to record their phone calls and then it gets analyzed, or is it real time being analyzed and so on and so forth? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we tie into, whether it's UCAS, your Office tools like G Suite or Office 365, or your CRM, we're going to tie into those tools via an API. Okay. And so it's not necessarily based off of the recording, but it's more so we're pulling that data via, say, Ring Central, for example. And then we gather that data and we show you that data the next day. So we understand that people are working sometimes until midnight. So we don't necessarily show you that data in real time that same exact day, but we show you that data the following day.
Is it actual natural language that's being tracked, or is there transcription taking place and then you're using the transcripted data?
We use natural language processing.
Awesome. Okay, that's great.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then Sam, if you can go back into that slide deck, the slide after the demo.
Sure.
Then we'll just talk about more logistics. How does this work as far as implementation is concerned? So this is just an overview of what that product looks like, what you saw. So, from the top right-hand side, you see those weekly trends from the organization and your team. And then below that, you can see the team overview showing, performance by each team member. And then on the left-hand side, you have that performance as far as that insight to their daily activity in each one of their tools, and then followed up by their heartbeat of their day, which is really cool and my personal favorite part of Prodoscore. And the next slide, please. So with the technology, going off of, Sam, your question. So There is actually no impact to the end user. So because we tie in via APIs, there's nothing that the end user or the employee has to do on a daily basis in order for you to start tracking their activity. All they simply have to do is log into Salesforce like they normally would, start working in Salesforce, etc. The only thing that they would potentially have to do is if you are wanting to track, say, LinkedIn, for example, using a Chrome extension, they would just have to give access and install that on their Chrome browser. But you get a notification on if they have done that or not, so that way you can keep up with it. But then also, we do have the highest level of cloud security. We are connected with the Google Cloud Platform, so we share a lot of our security with them, which I have another slide that goes over that. But also, you're going to get this trending data for daily, weekly, monthly productivity. So in that way, you can see trends that are going on. And then also, we're going to give you those baselines for given roles. You can certainly customize them if you need to. We actually haven't had anybody need to as of yet, because we've put in a lot of thought into these specific given roles. And then also the machine learning will actually learn the behaviors of your specific team as well. Okay. If you can go to the next slide for me. So this is just covering our security aspect of it. We understand that especially when we're gathering this kind of data, this is extremely important. So we have our SOC 2 compliance, our GDPR, EU and US Privacy Shield. But then, like I said, we are developed in Google's cloud platform. So we are able to share that, or we are able to have that shared responsibility model with security, which covers things like HIPAA and things like that. Okay.
How long is the data kept for?
So the data is going to be kept for 3 years, which is an industry standard for things like this. So in that way, you can also be comparing and contrasting your team's data as well.
Cool.
Okay, but we have read-only access, so we can actually we actually don't have access to be able to read the data ourselves. So the only people that are able to read the data are actually the admins or the leaders at your specific company. Okay.
Cool.
You'll go to the next slide for me. So just to finish up, what does the implementation process look like? So this is actually very exciting because within 72 hours, our implementation specialist will get you guys set up. We'll connect with the super admin for your guys' specific tools that you're wanting to track. And the implementation process literally takes 15 minutes. It's a matter of your super admin sharing their screen, and it's as easy as simply like downloading an application. It's a very simple process. And then we'll start with your Office 365 or G Suite. We'll start that implementation, give that 24 hours to aggregate the data. And then we meet again for about 5 minutes, and we'll actually connect with your other tools as well. Okay, but we understand also that when it comes to something like this, without being strategic about how you are introducing this to your team, it can get misconstrued and it can be taken the wrong way. So we actually provide you with best practices, and we help you navigate how to introduce this to your team. So we're not ever going to just say, here's Prodoscore, have at it. We're going to provide you with all of that support necessary in order to speak to your team about what you guys are doing with Prodoscore.
I think if it's communicated effectively, then it could be a real nice. You could put a really good spin on it in terms of like, hey, you know what, you always wanted to know why Joanne is beating your numbers and so on and so forth. We're gonna get visibility into exactly Joanne's activities and so on and so forth, so you can actually learn from your peers and up your numbers. So, you know, I think it's really a matter of how it's communicated, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's why we have specific specialists that will actually help you in communicating that.
Mhm. So one thing that hasn't been touched on at all, Amanda, and I'm sure everyone's out there thinking, oh yeah, no, this is really cool, and they can see how useful it would be, if nothing else. I mean, I'm just like, hey, you know what? You can see some these gap periods and really see. I think the biggest thing is like, how much of the day are they actually working, right? Yeah, that's really that's the
Yeah,
initial concern, and then once you actually get visibility and see they're actually working, then you're more interested in like, well, are they working on the right things, right? And are they working effectively, which is sort of the next step, etc. But
exactly.
what
And it,
what can what can you share about people's maturity, so to speak, like an organization's maturity in leveraging this information and this solution?
yeah. So by maturity, are you talking about like how they communicate to it or how they use it?
Yeah, more like, you know, how they're using it, you know,
Mhm.
how long it takes to be able to leverage it, and, you know, level of sophistication, I guess. I mean, what sort of different ranges of sophistication have you seen with different clients and how they're using it?
So one way that I've seen companies use Prodoscore is especially when onboarding new individuals. So with Prodoscore, like we saw with Matt, you're able to see what has helped him generate success, right? With new hires, what happens is oftentimes, obviously they're not going to be out the gate running right away. It may take, 6 months, it may take 3 months, a month, whatever the case is, in order for them to start being successful in their given role, right? So what Prodoscore will allow you to do is understand better what works, what doesn't work. How do we schedule our day? And then that way you can go back and tell your new hires, okay, this is how success looks at, month 1, month 2. I'm expecting your Prodoscore to be at a 70. I'm expecting there to be high levels of call volume. I'm expecting X, Y, or Z. Then that way you can go and address that. You can get a better understanding. Are they actually doing it? Because what's hard, let's take a sales role, for example. If you have somebody who is month 2 into a sales role, they may not necessarily be bringing in revenue yet, which is fine. However, what you do want to make sure to see is that they're putting in the activity that's going to be leading to it, bringing in revenue, right? But what happens if you see somebody who's in month 2, they're not bringing in any revenue, which isn't alarming, but then you go into Prodoscore and you see they're not working whatsoever. Then that way you can have a better understanding of where they're at as a new hire and also evaluate, are they really going to be a good fit for our company or not? So that's one way that we've seen at Prodoscore be of great use for companies, especially we've had some companies who have, across the US, they'll do like a new hire class of 200. And so you really want to see out of those 200, who's going to make it, who's not going to make it. That one was a specific like logistics company. So that was really important because they do see people kind of fall off after 3 months, but they were able to see much sooner, almost like a skill versus will type of mentality. The will is certainly there, but the skill level, we're working on that. Versus if
Mhm.
the will part is not there, the skill level is not ever going to change.
Mhm. Yeah, I just think, you know, there's great opportunities, for instance, like you to like um A/B test on activity, right? You could
Yeah,
like say, okay, these 5 salespeople, I'm gonna have them focus on LinkedIn as being their focus for generating new sales, versus these five are going to be, and you would take similarly scoring people and change their process and literally just watch the results, right?
Yeah.
It could be, you could get pretty sophisticated. Obviously, the larger organizations with more people, it allows them to really take a look at how those different practices change their relative success, I suppose.
Exactly.
Amanda, can you just touch on the pricing? I'm sure everyone wants to understand what that looks like, how it's packaged, and so on and so forth. Is it like
Sure.
most cloud-based products where it's really a license per user being tracked, or is it, can you tell us
Yeah.
about how that works?
So we price per seat per integration, because we understand that different departments are going to require different integrations, right? So we price per seat per integration. Prices usually range anywhere between $40 and $60 per seat.
Okay, and that's really dependent on how many integrations they've got. So if they've just got their Office 365 and phone, that might be one thing. But if they've got Salesforce and then they've got X and Y and
Yes,
everything else, it could be nearer the 70 mark.
absolutely.
Okay, and then in terms of like, what sort of metrics have you got in terms of that ROI on that $40 to $70? Do you have
Yes,
it?
yes. We actually have a great ROI calculator that I can send over to you, Sam, or I can send out to anybody who's wanting it. What
Cool.
that does is, if you think about the number of hours that your average remote worker works in a day, the average is about 3.5 hours per day. So that means if you are paying somebody for a 40-hour work week, let's say you're paying them a salary, but that's basically off of a 40-hour work week. You're expecting them to work at least 40 hours, but they're only working 3.5 hours a day. What Prodoscore is going to do is allow you to understand who is working less, who's working more, but then it's also going to increase that productivity level as we spoke about. And so because of that, you're automatically going to see a higher ROI. But then also, unfortunately, we don't like to have this conversation today, but it's a very real conversation that a lot of companies are having to work through right now. And that is of layoffs. A lot of companies are having to make cuts. And because of that, what you're able to see with Prodoscore is, do you have an employee who's maybe working just an hour a day? Then the question is, do I lay off that person, or do I lay off the person who is working a full 8 or 9 hours a day or more? I'm going to lay off the person who's working 1 hour. And so in that way, it helps you understand, who are you paying a salary for that actually is not working, and you've been struggling with that employee all along. So, you have to look at ROI in that format of, I'm going to actually start getting productivity out of my employees through something like Prodoscore, or I'm going to gain data that's going to show me information on if I have an employee that is not working where I need them to in order to justify their salary.
Yeah, I mean, for me, hell, if you're getting one extra hour of work a week for an employee, you've already paid for that license, right? Even if it was like the $70 license, that's an hour. Really, what's that cost to you?
Yeah.
It's gonna be probably over $70 an hour, at least in lots of professional organizations and so on and so forth, right? So I think it becomes a bit of a slam dunk. Sure, immediately you say $40 to $70 an hour per person, you'll think, oh, well, that's a lot of money. But then you know what you just shared is like, well, actually, people are working 3.5 hours a day. Like, well, I tell you what, if I had somebody who was working 3.5 hours a day for me, I would be they yeah they'd be getting marching orders. So I think this is super powerful. But
Yeah,
equally, you know, can you just talk about, I mean, you guys were doing this way before remote working happened, right?
we
So
were. Yeah.
the ROI was relevant even in a regular office environment. So just because
Mhm.
maybe you're not working from home, your business is still working 9 to 5 in their office, there's still ROI here, right? Because
Absolutely.
it really is visibility that you've never really had before, um, to, you know, activity and
Hmm.
productivity. Um,
Right.
so I mean, like before COVID, tell me about Prodoscore before COVID and before remote work. You know, what portion of your business was for regular office? You know, was it like 40%? Or like,
So
do you have a
yeah.
feeling for that?
So let's take that case study that I had showed you guys in the beginning through that slide. That was actually from before COVID. So that was um, a large company that has multiple locations across the US. They were all working from their office. They had none of their employees were actually working. Um, that one right before that.
Is this
None of
this
their
one?
employees were working remotely. And no, the one that shows the benefits of Prodoscore.
I'm sorry, I'm like,
So a slide before that.
oh, this guy. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes. Yep. So this $1.6 million in savings in office space, that was actually before COVID. So what happened was we deployed Prodoscore for their teams as an office space tool. And what happened was they started saying this is giving us even more visibility and more data about what our employees are doing on a daily basis than we have even when we're just sitting next to them. So if you're sitting next to them, yeah, you can hear them on the phone or things like that, but you can't necessarily see if they're like on Facebook as well. You know what I mean? And so what this did was it showed them even though we're working from the office, what if we sent a lot of these people home to work? We would still have the same visibility, but then also our employees wouldn't have to worry about, in some cases like Chicago or LA, a 2 hour a day commute to and from the office. So then we're not having to worry about people showing up late to work. We're not having to worry about as many expenses as far as like different like um, harassment type expenses and things like
Okay.
that. They're not having to worry about a lot of that stuff. So they ended up sending a lot of their employees home. And because they did that, they ended up shutting down quite a few of their offices. They left a couple of them still up, but they shut down quite a few and saved $1.6 million in office space costs. And
Yeah.
especially in today's climate, think of how much that is going to benefit a company who is, in some cases, maybe barely staying afloat or is trying to save money in any way, shape, or form that they can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Amanda, thanks so much. It's time for us to wrap up here. I've got a couple of slides here. This first slide is the key cloud work from home solution takeaways. First and foremost, are not going to be buying equipment. Obviously, work from home is here obviously it attracts younger employees, millennials, and so on and so forth, increases employee satisfaction and retention, and obviously reduces your office costs. And then finally, obviously, productivity doesn't happen by chance. You get what you measure. And per those quotes from Prodoscore, if you can't read the scoreboard, then you don't know the score. If you don't know the score, you can't tell the winners from the losers. So that's the key takeaways from today. If you'd like to start evaluating your work from home solution options, we have a work from home interactive quick assessment we can send to you, or you can just reach out to any one of us. Again, this webinar was recorded. It will be sent out to everybody, or you can find it on our website, usavoicedata.com, under the Learning Center. There's webinars, solution webinars, so you'll be able to find it there. Should be posted in the next couple of days. And with that, I'm going to wrap up. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to unmute themselves and throw them out there.
I do want to address one question that we got through the chat. I answered it in the chat bubble, but just so in that way we're addressing it. So the minimum seat requirement is 10 seats.
Okay. Perfect. Well, with that, thanks everyone for their time. Have a great rest of the week. Stay warm and stay healthy. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll set you up for an independent discussion with Amanda, or we can talk about some of the other solutions that we can help you out with. All right. Thanks so much. Have a great day.